Good morning, guys. This is Dr. Rob Kelly, the Addiction Doctor, along with Jennifer Lovely. This is the Recovery Channel podcast, coming live on Facebook and YouTube to you in your face today. I'm live in San Antonio. Where are you, Jen?
I'm in Sedona, Arizona. You've got some energy this morning. I love it.
I always have energy and we have great guests. Woohoo! What can I do this feel? I love it. I love it when we do different stuff. Like we have different guests on who specialize in different areas. That gets me excited because, you know, I love it when we're not only concentrating on alcohol and drugs and recovery itself, but now today we're going to get freaking educated. And that's what I'm talking about. You know, it's just going to be freaking awesome.
Well, I love backstage. We were talking about this Recovery Channel podcast is not just about drugs and alcohol. It's really about recovering from your life. It's about recovering from old belief systems. It's really about just recovering, period. And that's so much what I love about this, what we're doing out there in the world. It's big, it's important, and I love the conversation. So I'm excited too.
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely awesome. So Leslie McMurray's on the show, guys. If you Google her real quick before you jump on, you'll know who she is. I kind of heard of the lady, and then I Googled it, and I thought, oh, yeah, I remember that because I used to live in Dallas. So, yeah, it's going to be awesome. So Leslie's on the show straight after this, guys. Stick around. Good morning, guys, from San Antonio, Texas, coming live to you. This is the Recover Channel podcast. My name is Dr. Rob Kelly, the Addiction Doctor, along with Jennifer Lovely, as usual. Leslie, welcome to the show.
Good morning. You sound pretty fired up.
Oh, I'm always fired up. I'm speaking to great people. This is the best part about my job. I mean, we have practices. Me and Jen work together with people, and we do a great job. But when you get guests on the show that you know you're going to get schooled in the nicest possible way, this I really like. Plus, I'm always upbeat. I think being upbeat and is contagious, you know. So hopefully, we'll help it. Yes.
Yeah, yes, I agree 100%. I couldn't imagine my job being better, actually, because I get paid to have great conversations with human beings. That's what I love. So I want to preface this conversation today, this podcast today, talking about transgender. And what I also want to say is that I am going to ask some ignorant questions, what is seemingly ignorant. It may feel offensive to some of you, but it's not to be offensive. I'm doing it on purpose because I believe that we all need to be deeply educated on transgender, on the change that people are making in their lives. And I think it's confusing for people. I think there's judgment behind it. I think that it somehow feels like a personal attack on them and they get scared. So all of that, I bring this up because I'm going to be asking questions that may seem strange. And Leslie is aware of that. We've already talked about that. So talk to me about when you knew that you were a she.
I always knew, really. I guess you get self-awareness maybe around the age of 3, 4, 5 years old. I remember my earliest recalled memory of talking to my mom about it anyway was when I was maybe 5 years old. I grew up in Southern California, and I was sitting on the floor and my mom was ironing. And I was born a long time ago. I'm really old. So I was born before they had sonograms. Parents would pick a boy name and a girl name. And so I asked my mom, I said, what was my girl name going to be? And she paused and she said, we were going to name you Leslie. And to me, that's always been my name. And I adopted it then and there. And I used to practice writing it, and I would then throw it away because I don't want people seeing it, that I was writing that name down. But that helped me feel a little bit better about myself. The word transgender wasn't really coined until the 1970s, and I grew up in the 60s. So I didn't even have a word to describe myself. I also, if you think about, what kids today have, they face an awful lot of pressure now, things that I didn't have. But one of the things that I lacked growing up was one of these. Mm-hmm. I couldn't type in, why do I feel like the way I do? And find a gazillion other people that feel like I do that I could reach out to and talk to. There was no Orange is the New Black. There was no movies. There was no anything, no role models that I could look to that explains why I felt the way I felt. It didn't change the way I felt, but I just felt very alone. I felt like a freak. And growing up through school, I just didn't relate to things that a lot of the guys wanted to do. I wanted to gravitate more to the girls. I wanted to be what they were doing. And it was just really challenging because there was no resource that I could imagine other than prayer, like hoping that Santa Claus brings you a different gender for Christmas. That's really all I wanted. I just wanted to be a girl. Nothing that was it was all cast upon me. It's like, because of what a doctor said when he glanced between my legs, I get saddled with that for the rest of my life, that I have to live this certain way and, do what society expects guys to do. And I did the best that I could because I was always kind of a pleaser growing up. So I have 2 daughters. I have 5 grandchildren. But when I came out, everything blew up. I lost friends. I lost a 33-year marriage. I lost my stuff. I lost my job. I lost my career. And that all happened over a period of about 90 days.
Wow.
It was absolutely dizzying. And so I sort of ended up reinventing myself. And now I work as an advocate for transgender people for Resource Center in Dallas.
That's awesome. I love that. So tell me when you came out. What day was it? What time was it? What created that thought pattern in your heads? As in, today is the day.
Holy crap. There's some trauma associated with that.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was married for a long time, and my ex, I guess, knew something was up because things had started slowly, beginning in about 2009. I started painting my toenails and, that kind of stuff. It was like, oh, okay, that's just a quirk, but it's just, it was sort of the crack in the dam. But my ex thought that I was cheating on her, but I wasn't. She was absolutely sure of it. And so she was going through my mail, my phone, and just invasive of everything that I had. There was absolutely zero privacy. And she came down to my work. I was working at a major radio station for a Fortune 500 company here in Dallas. And she came down and she threatened to just basically wreck the place unless I told her the truth. And I said, I am not cheating on you. What do you want me to do? Take a lie detector test? And she goes, yeah. And I said, okay. So she called up and she scheduled a polygraph for the following day. And this was the day before my birthday. So she scheduled a polygraph on my birthday. Happy birthday. Here's your polygraph. So she left happy that she was going to get the answers that she wanted. I was tickled to death because I'm going to get this big monkey off my back because I'm not guilty. And so I'm driving home and I'm thinking, what could they possibly ask me in a polygraph that I would be uncomfortable answering? And I thought, I got nothing to hide, nothing, zero, except that. And so if they asked about gender identity, because she'd asked the question a few times before and I always kind of shrugged it off. So I get home and she said, I canceled the polygraph. And I said, good, I'm glad. And she said, but I still know you're hiding something. So I went outside. We had this big, giant house on 8.5 acres in Flower Mound. And we had a path that led out to a fire pit. And I sat out there for about an hour, drinking a glass of wine and just staring at the afternoon sun. And there was a horse ranch next to us. And so I took 2 pictures because it was just so idyllic and quiet because I knew it was going to be the last bit of peace that I was going to have for a while. And so I walked back in the house and I said, look, if you want to know, I'll tell you. But if I tell you, this isn't something I can ever untell you. And it will change everything. If I don't tell you, it won't come back and haunt you. I'll take it to my grave. And she said, I want to know. And so I told her. And so that was the glamorous coming out thing. I was just backed into a corner. And I didn't want to, and I was willing to die with it. And quite honestly, it would have probably been very shortly after that because I was absolutely at my limit. So at that point, I felt I had nothing to lose. And ironically, I had everything to lose, and I did, but I have no regrets.
Wow. I'm like stunned by this story. In so many ways, that's like one of the most beautiful stories I have ever heard. You spoke, one of the things that I say about myself, I know Rob says this about himself, is that we support people in telling their truth. And that is just like the fire of truth. And so just so much, so I'm bowing to you. That's beautiful. So talk to me about then thereafter. It sounds like you lost your job, you lost your home. Well, you probably had to sell your home. How did it go? And then talk to me about your children.
Yeah, I'd been on hormones for several months by that point. I wasn't out at work, but I was a little bit terrified because cross-sex hormones do some amazing things. I call them the slow motion miracle because they don't happen overnight. Also, hormones give, but they don't take away. And that's why I have this god-awful, terrible voice, which I used to make a lot of money for many years, gave me a great career. But now I hate it because when I talk over the phone or I do a microphone like I am now, I always get misread. I always get misgendered. I get, "Thank you, sir. Please pull forward to the second window." And I'm like, because it hurts every time, like a slap in the face. I don't like it. So I just don't go to drive-throughs. So I'm healthier probably because of it. But when I talk on the phone, if I haven't spoken to that person before, I always get the sir thing. And so I correct them. And sometimes it takes 3 or 4 or 5 times. And with, telemarketers, and it just gets annoying. So if it's people that I'm only going to talk to once, I just let it fly, hang up and forget it, But if it's somebody that I'm going to have to talk to again, we have to establish that. So I was working at this radio station. They're going to they do this all the time. They have these junkets where you'll go to a resort and they'll put you up there free for a week or 2. And then you come back and you talk about it on air. And it's kind of part of the ad deal. So they're going to send us to Punta Cana in the Dominican Republic, which is a beautiful resort down there. Well, I'd been on hormones long enough that I had boobs now. I mean, not like man boobs, but boobs. And they were small, but they were clearly, there was no doubt as to what they were. And so I was afraid that they were going to send me to this beach resort with like 8 people that I work with. And I was going to have to explain why I'm at this beach resort in the Dominican Republic, but I never go in the water. I never go in the pool. I never take my shirt off. It would have been really uncomfortable. And it's like I would have ended up having to basically come out in the Dominican Republic where they don't treat transgender people very nicely. So I was scared about that trip. But I ended up getting outed anyway, and I got let go. And interestingly, it wasn't the lack of revenue, because I worked 30 years in the business, and I thought, I'll be out of work for like a week. All I got to do is make a few phone calls, and it's on to the next city. So I wasn't too traumatized by that. What I was freaking out about was being stuck and not being able to transition fully, because I couldn't go backwards, but I couldn't go forwards. And that's when I panicked, and I drove home from work in tears. And it was one of those things where I wasn't even in touch with myself in the car. I got home and I couldn't tell you how I got home. I couldn't tell you what route I took. I had no memory of the trip. I was just hysterical. And I came very close. I had a .45 automatic, and I sat down with my back against a gun safe. I flipped off the safety, and I was like seconds away, and I thought, I have to tell my kids why. And my phone was across the room. And in the time it took me to get up and walk across the room, I realized I just couldn't do that to them. Because for me, I didn't care one way or the other. And I set the gun down, I put the safety back on, and I didn't finish the text that I started sending. I just deleted it. And that was started my road to recovery from there. It wasn't all, it wasn't this linear progression. It, had ups and downs and things. And basically my path because I had been under so much stress that I gained a lot of weight. I was like 218 pounds. And I found a diet that worked, and that was a glass of wine for lunch, a couple of glasses for dinner. And in 4.5 months, by Christmas, I was like 168 pounds. And I looked great, but I wasn't very healthy. And so, yeah. As far as my kids, I was outed to them by my ex. I didn't have the opportunity to tell them. But my relationship with them is better now than it's ever been before, because they know who I am. I'm not trying to pretend somebody that I'm not. I'm just a real person. And they like the person that I am now a lot better than the person I was before. And I don't blame them. I feel more comfortable in the role. It's interesting. I'm not their mom, but they don't look at me as their dad. It's parental, but it's not mother-father. So we don't celebrate Mother's Day or Father's Day. We celebrate Transparent Day, which is the first Sunday in November every year. My youngest daughter, she's 6 years younger than her sister. I walked my oldest daughter down the aisle as a guy. My youngest daughter, I had come out to, and we had a great relationship. We talk on the phone all the time. So this was several years ago. She'd been dating a guy for like 5 years, and we all knew they were going to get married. And but it's like, come on, ask the question, will you? So we were just talking, and I said, hey, what'd you guys do this past weekend? And she says, oh, we went to my friend's wedding. We had a great time. And she said, until they did the father-daughter dance. And she said, I just lost it. She was just sobbing. She realized that the day that would come when she would get married, she would never have that moment. And I said, I am so sorry. I said, I didn't mean to take that from you. I said, when you get married, when the time comes, I'll play whatever role you want. It's not my show, it's yours. And she says, I know. She said, I'll find something for you to do that's appropriate. And then she paused and she goes, one thing's for sure, though. And I said, yeah, what's that? She goes, you and your fake tits aren't walking me down the aisle. And I laughed, she laughed, and that's the relationship we have, that she can say that. But the fact is, I didn't walk her down the aisle. I was treated in an extremely respectful way at her wedding. My wife, Katie, and I led the procession, sat where parents sit, treated in a place of honor. She handled the language beautifully because the officiant said, instead of who gives this woman to be married, the traditional answer is her mother and I do. He turned to me and said, Leslie, do you give your blessing to this wedding? And I said, yes, I do. So she also asked if I would speak because I wanted to introduce the girl that I knew growing up to the people that knew her as an adult. And so I spoke for about 5 minutes or so and then handed it off to the best man who did his toast. So they did the first dance to The Way You Look Tonight from Frank Sinatra, and it was beautiful. And she handed off Ryan to his mom, and she turned and she put her hand out to me. Wow. And I danced with my daughter at her wedding. And I still get emotional talking about it because I've never felt more loved and more accepted. And more than any single thing that can happen, affirmation by family is the one thing that will save the lives of so many transgender kids and even adults. Because if the family wraps their arm around them and says, I love you for who you are, no matter, we always have a place. We're accepted, we're loved, and it's okay. But it's that kind of rejection and isolation that drives people to drugs, alcohol, and a whole variety of things, including suicide.
That's amazing. Listen, be careful how you're telling your story, Leslie, because me and Jennifer are going to start bawling in a minute.
Yeah, well, I'm right there with you.
Absolutely amazing. Listen, guys,
I can tell a story. I end up reliving it. I can't just tell it.
Beautiful. Guys, Leslie's on the show. We've got to our commercial break with our sponsor. Back in a second. Welcome to So guys, if you were just watching, that was Life Over Addiction. If you're listening, let me tell you about Lance Wright. He's a transformational life coach. Let me help you navigate your life's path back to one of purpose and meaning, he says. The chains of shame and guilt no longer have to hold you back. Let's start a new conversation, says Lance. LifeOverAddiction.com, or you can email him info@lifeoveraddiction.com, or why not call him? Lance on 310-890-2337. So listen to your story, Leslie. I probably know the answers, but I want to ask you anyway. So during all that stuff and all that torment and all that trauma that you went through, what was your self-sabotaging actions during that period?
Once I stopped drinking, I quit sabotaging myself. If anything, it was probably still I battle with food. I'm an emotional eater, and so if I have an emotional void, I tend to fill it with cheeseburgers and tacos and comfort food. I'm a great cook. I love to cook. I'm fearless in the kitchen. I love to bake. So those are my things that I battle. But I've always been in really good physical shape. I did the MS 150 from the bike ride from Houston to Austin. I've done that 3 times. I did the Shiner ride a bunch, which is a century. So I generally like to be active. So I'm really not too big into self-sabotage. Generally, if I'm going to have a drink, it's because I'm happy, not because I'm sad. When I'm sad, I want to sort out what the problem is and fix it, and I don't want to be clouded. So I don't really have a lot of problems with alcohol or drugs or anything like that. Plus, I'm married to a judge, so
holy moly,
yeah, my wife's a judge.
I love that. You are the coolest parent, by the way. Just like there's so much self-awareness inside of you that it's just beautiful to see from this lens.
I've done a lot of work. One of the things I recommend is keep a journal. And I've kept a journal for 8.5, 9 years now. And it's really telling because I'll go back and reread it and look at it. And sometimes I'll even amend it because I write when I'm raw. And I'll go back and reread that and say, do I still feel that way? And it's kind of like self-therapy.
Yeah, I love that. So one of the things that I had a friend die in September, and I was down in Southern California, and her niece is gay. So it's she doesn't refer to herself through pronouns, but she's gay, but she had her friends over who were transgender. And we ended up in these beautiful conversations late into the evening. And one of the things that I'm curious about, and I wonder, is do young people regret, or will they regret, or is there psychological stuff that comes with transitioning so early, like at 20 or 19 or even earlier? Can you talk about what that like how that could affect them, and because from this lens, from a judgment lens, right, we're going to go, oh no, they're going to hurt themselves and they're going to regret it. So can we just have that conversation?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I think that what that implies, though, is that being transgender is a decision. It's like whether to buy a dog or a cat, or whether to have Fruit Loops or fruit for breakfast. It's not a choice. It's an identity. It's who you are. Your gender identity is fixed at a very early age. I know that I'm going to take a wild guess here and say that you identify as female, and you're pretty comfortable in those shoes.
Right.
Did you need someone at age 5 to tell you that you were female and remind you?
No, but I will tell you that my father raised me like I was a boy.
Right. Did it work?
It didn't.
Okay. Because that identity is fixed. It's not changeable. This reparative therapy doesn't work. It's malpractice. It's abuse. I don't know what type of therapy it would take to convince you you're a guy, but it would probably be pretty Guantanamo-like.
Yeah.
So the detransition is what we refer to it as, is very uncommon with people that have transitioned. Not to say that it doesn't happen, but there are some people that might say transition for attention or other reasons. But for people whose gender identity is different from the sex assigned at birth, it's very, very uncommon. Other reasons might be isolation or rejection from family, or threatening a divorce from a mate, or finding out that just the deck of societal cards is worse than you're able to handle. But it's not because you've changed the way you feel. You're saying, I'm going to present differently in order to survive. And I understand that. I get that. But for kids, and I'll talk about young kids first, because there's even been some efforts in the legislative session here in Texas to make it a crime for doctors to aid in the transition of a juvenile. What they're saying is they're using words like chemical castration, which is absolutely absurd, because in a child who hasn't gone through puberty yet, like say a 7-year-old who is identifying, because they're identifying younger and younger now, because again, there are role models, there's awareness that there's other people like them, and they're saying, that's me, that's who I am. Like Jazz is a good example, who transitioned young, and she has not changed one iota. She is who she is. But the transition for a youngster who has not gone through puberty is purely social. It might be a change in clothing, hairstyle, name, and pronouns. All of those are 100% reversible if the kid changes their mind. So there's no harm in that. When they hit what's called Tanner stage 2 of puberty, there's 5 Tanner stages. And they're identified by changes in the genitalia and breast growth and voice change and things like that. So it goes along this 5-stage progression. At Tanner stage 2, in kids that the doctor, the parents, and the kid always leads this, if they decide that they want to go in this direction, they can essentially medically hit the pause button on puberty. And they'll use 2 medications. Typically, one is Supralin and the other is Lupron. One's an injectable and the other is like a pellet. And that will delay puberty. That's all it does. If you remove that, then the biological spontaneous puberty will occur. But as long as that's in there, it will delay puberty, and they will usually delay it until about age 16. So if a child comes out at say 7 and says, this is who I am, they have until 9 years to get everything sorted out. And the indications for a transgender kid are they insistent, consistent, and persistent? And if they are, then they start looking at, they'll sit them down with psychologists, they'll work through all of that. So they have 9 years to sort that out. Once they introduce cross-sex hormones, if they transition young, they end up with the beautiful results because they don't have the curse of what I call testosterone poisoning. Because there's a lot with me that's irreversible, like the giant hands and the size 12 feet, so I can't buy shoes at DSW. I have to find something on the internet to find cute shoes, because you can't find cute shoes in a size 12, which really sucks. I don't want to be 6 feet tall. I don't want my voice to be like this. So I would have loved to have had puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones when I was 16, but that sort of therapy just wasn't available back in the 1960s or early 70s. And so here I am. So I've had to make peace with my body, with what it is, but I understand why kids do it younger, because they are indistinguishable and they can live a life that is, we kind of call it in the community, stealth. But the other thing about living stealth is kids have it a little bit less likely, but for me, it's ridiculous because of Google. If you Google my name, my dead name is going to show up and my career is going to show up and all this other stuff. So, I'm out. I got nothing to hide. But so generally living stealth is kind of like going from one closet into another.
Yeah,
definitely. Do you think so when children grow up, I know when I grew up, I wanted to be like my dad. I wanted to be, work here, and my sister wanted to be a nurse. And, when we grow up, we just want to be like our mom and dad. Mm-hmm. So do you think there's confusion there with young kids who just want to be like the parent, transgender or not, that people are making the wrong decisions early just to please? Because we always want to please our parents or our elders, just to fall into that trap of just wanting to be like you rather than the inside feeling of wanting to be different.
Yeah, sure. The feeling itself isn't, like I said, it's not a decision. You are who you are. But I think, there's kids that may, I'll give an example. I had a friend, a guy that I worked with in radio for a lot of years, a guy named Randy. And he had a son named Colby. And when Colby was born, he said, hey, you want to come over and meet Colby? I said, sure. And so I went over to his house. Colby had just gotten home from the hospital. He's like 6.5 pounds, laying in his bassinet with a full-size NFL football. And the football is about the same size as the baby. I mean, he couldn't obviously hold it or cuddle it. I'm thinking, most people get a kid bears or something like that, but no, this football. So I said to Randy, I said, what's with the football? And he goes, oh, well, I just want him to get used to it because I want him to play football when he grows up. And it's like, well, as a parent, isn't your job to help Colby live whatever his dreams are rather than to live yours? What if he wants to play the saxophone or be an architect or play highlight or tennis or something? Is he going to be a disappointment because he didn't choose football? And putting a football in the crib isn't going to make him any more likely to be a football player. Turns out Colby pulls cable for TV, sports places. He'll go and lay the cable for the TV cameras and audio and all that sort of stuff. So that's what he does. He doesn't play football. So I think that while kids will sometimes try and do things to please their parents, I think that's separate from gender identity. I mean, I wanted to please my parents, but I knew there was no place in society or religion or anywhere else for a little boy that thought they were a little girl. It wasn't a possibility in 1963 when I was 5 years old. It just wasn't on the, that wasn't a card that was on the table. I had no idea that could even happen.
Yeah, for sure. And I actually remember like bringing home my kids and having, their dad do the same thing with the football. And they had to wear the Eagles outfit because he was a big Philadelphia Eagles out, it was like, it was the whole thing, and what happens is that then our kids become extensions of us rather than they get to be their own human being. Right. Mm-hmm. And then that really fucks them up as well. So talk to me about the psychological effects of what it is to be in our society. When we have somebody, I think I just read recently that Trump he stopped all support for LGBTQ or something recently. He just passed a new law. What it's like psychologically to live in this society and be shunned, right? Because we can talk about what it was like in the 50s, 40s, 30s for Black people. And now we've got white people that are transgender and they get the same treatment.
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly go on for a long time.
I know. So give me an overview.
Trump hasn't passed any laws, but he signed executive orders. And the difference between that is that executive orders can be reversed by Joe Biden the minute he sits down. So he's probably going to spend the first week there cleaning up some of the mess, but also reversing a lot of the executive orders of the last 4 years because he hasn't been able to get anything through Congress because it's kind of a stalemate there.
Right.
But among the things that he's done, President Obama wrote what's called a Dear Colleague letter, and it was signed by the Department of Justice and Department of Education in 2016. It went out in May. And it basically said that Title IX, that gender identity and sexual orientation are protected under Title IX. And so that we're to be extended the same rights and privileges as anyone else. And that was rescinded by Donald Trump, among a litany of other things. There was over 70 executive orders that had to do with limiting the rights of LGBTQ people. One of the things that we had in our good column was a Supreme Court decision, which was that Clayton County, Georgia decision back in June that said the Title VII prohibition against discrimination because of sex includes sexual orientation, gender identity. Gender expression, incidentally, had been settled back in like the late 1980s in a case. It was Price Waterhouse v. Hopkins. So now we have employment rights, but we don't have housing protections. Doctors can refuse care, and they often do, because they're not comfortable treating us or they just don't want to. We can also be, there's a military service ban. Let's see what else. We can be denied access to homeless shelters because they changed the equal access law. So there's an awful lot of things that are stacked. So that certainly can change things. Now, what I do want to point out, there's a tremendous amount of violence against the transgender community, and that's focused almost exclusively on the African-American community. I want to talk about a group that has it rough. Black trans women have it about as bad as you can have it, because if you think about, you have two babies born, and one's male and one female, the male child has an instant advantage. If you take that female child and make her African-American, Now there's a further disadvantage because not only is she female, but she's African American. Her life is worth less. Her opportunities at education and employment are less. Virtually every participation in society is less. If you make that woman transgender and saying in the Black community, I'm rejecting masculinity and choosing femininity over that, good luck. And then you add economics to it, and you add a lack of education to it, and the ability to be refused care even in a homeless shelter. I asked a Dallas police officer a while back, said, hypothetical situation. You're out cruising around in your police car, and it's like 1:45 in the morning, and you find a Black trans woman on the street. She's not doing anything wrong. What do you do? What do you tell her? What resources are there? Where do you tell her to go? She could be refused at a homeless shelter. She could be kicked out of her apartment just solely for being transgender. Can't be kicked out because she's African American. That's protected under Title VII. There's housing discrimination, and that's punishable. But can be kicked out because you're transgender and you make the other neighbors nervous or they don't understand. So what do you tell this person? Where do they go? It's cold. They need shelter. He said, I don't know. And I said, well, we need better answers.
So is that what you're doing? You're helping them? Rob, you're on mute.
There is right now, there's a really amazing shelter. They're doing incredible work. There's a friend of mine that runs it. Her name is Pocahontas. And it's called the House of Rebirth. And it focuses on African-American women who are primarily homeless or need a place to kind of get themselves together, get employment. She helps get them clothing so they're presentable for job interviews and helps them put together resumes. She's doing just amazing work, but there are no grants available that I'm aware of. So she's kind of doing it on a shoestring. So,
That's crazy. Absolutely. Yeah. Guys, Leslie McMurray's on the show. One more word from our sponsor. Stick around, guys. It's an awesome interview. Welcome back to the show, guys. That was Liver and Recovery Interventions. Recovery begins today. Recovery begins together. Give the gift of recovery. Travis is a good friend of ours. In fact, Jennifer's meeting him next week. We're talking about, Xanax seizure to a car crash, all sorts of crazy things happen to him. So he's got the experience. If a loved one's in trouble, call Travis, 801-573-4188, or visit the website, liveandrecoveryinterventions.com. Remember, guys, recovery begins today. Recovery begins together. So, Leslie, what does it say on your driving license and your passport, gender-wise?
It says Leslie Michelle McMurray, female.
Great. I thank God for that. I was hoping that was the answer he was going to say. Now, the other quick question I've got is, we talk about all these things that disadvantage to you, which is just wrong. But talk to me about once you had your insurance denied.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, before the Affordable Care Act, you would just get a letter back from the insurance company that says, we are not willing to insure you because you have a pre-existing condition, and that's being transgender. So they just considered it, they lumped it in with other pre-existing conditions, and that's why that clause is so important. That's why Section 1557, which was eliminated by the Trump administration, is so important. I spoke to the chief medical officer for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas at a symposium at FMU a while back. There was about 200-300 people in the room. And I asked him straight up, I said, if Section 1557 is removed from the Affordable Care Act, can you promise me that people like me, other people in the transgender community can still access health insurance through your company if that clause is removed? And his answer to me was chilling. He said, if I was you, I'd be worried.
Wow.
Yeah. So what they're saying is we will offer to not discriminate as long as there's a gun to our head. But if we're left to our own design, we're not going to offer insurance to you.
Right.
That's why it's so important.
It's such bullshit. Talk to me about what you made as a man in the radio, if you don't mind sharing this. And if it's too much, obviously don't ask. But then what you made as a woman.
Well, I'm doing different work. So,
Okay.
I'm working for a nonprofit now, so I don't expect to get rich through the nonprofit, but I was making a nice 6-figure salary with radio. Never made 7 figures, but 6, yeah. And then there's just so much free stuff that went along with it. It's like when I was working in Dallas, I was a spokesperson for BMW of Dallas. And as part of the deal, on the 1st of every month, I got a new BMW.
Shut up.
What?
Yeah.
Shut up.
I would turn in the old one and get a brand new one. It was like 8 miles. And I'd drive it for a month and just go on the air and talk about it. It's like, oh boy, it sure is fun to drive, and the corners like crazy, and it'll go this fast, and yada yada. And then
That must have been a big radio
Dr. Bob's language.
I know. That must have been a big radio station he was on.
Yeah.
Can we not mention it?
Nah.
I'm guessing. I think I know which one it is. Well, listen, you've still got the contacts over there. We need to get on FM or AM. I'm leaving that one with you, Leslie. We're changing lives on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I've got a big enough audience, so I'm thinking FM or AM. I used to have a radio show in AM in Dallas.
The perks are amazing. So it was really
I know.
cool. But, it's what I'm fond of saying is that I made a lot of money then. Now I'm making a difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I love what I do. I'm passionate about what I do. I look forward to working every day. And there's so many great corporations that we've worked with and that donate to our center. I also work with the medical community. That's kind of my main focus, if I've had one that's really been going on for 8 years, that doctors typically are not trained in transgender healthcare in the general curriculum of medical school. And that's one of the things I've been working towards just repeatedly, even if it's on just like the pediatric rotation or the OBGYN rotation, just add a couple of hours on it so that it's somewhere in their heads. Because I did a podcast a while back with a guy named Dr. Ryan Stanton. He's with the American College of Emergency Physicians. And so one of the things I talked about is that let's say you have a patient who comes in and he's not conscious, been in a car accident, got a head injury, facial laceration, he's 5'7", 165 pounds, brown hair, blue eyes. Do you give him a pregnancy test? And he said, well, why would I? And I said, because there is a guy that fits that description in Portland, Oregon, that's 4 months pregnant with his partner's baby. Because sometimes trans guys who look very much like guys can still carry a child. And if you give this person a anesthetic to knock them out or a pain medication of some kind without knowing that they're pregnant, you may kill a baby. And so if it's not even on that realm of things that you might think of doing, bad things can happen. Not that they always do, but it's a possibility. So it's just a matter of just being trained that we're not aliens, that it's okay to talk to us, it's okay to ask us questions. And one of the most common things that I tell them is, if you're going to ask me something, tell me why you're asking and you'll get a better answer. Because a lot of times we feel like if we come in for a sore throat, they want us to undress below the waist because they're just curious. So we get this amazing, ridiculous, kind of creepy treatment from doctors sometimes. And so just having a little bit of cultural competency, I don't teach medical skills, but I teach cultural competency to say, here's how to effectively treat a transgender person. And half of us have to train our own doctors.
Yeah. Well, and I'm not a transgender, but as a woman, I get creepy medical care at times, especially if it's a man. Like even like just a month ago, some really creepy things. It's so bizarre. I want to change this, the conversation just a little bit.
Sure. If I can correct real quick, one thing is the word transgender is adjective. It's not a noun. So I'm not a transgender. I'm a transgender woman. I'm not transgendered. I'm not a trans woman. So
that's so much for that.
And also sometimes people will use it as a verb. They're transgendered or that kind of thing. So it's very much an adjective. It's a descriptor.
Thank you.
I love that. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So you were married to a woman. And we talked a little bit about before we got live, and Dr. Rob asked you some questions, but I want to ask live. So if you are a transgender woman, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're attracted to females. Can we have that conversation a little bit? Because I think that's confusing for people.
Yeah, sexual orientation and gender identity, two different things. Sexual orientation is who you go to bed with. Gender identity is who you go to bed as.
Boom.
That's the best way to think about that.
Bang. That's
so,
it.
And it's like society will hang labels on people. I guess it's convenient for them, but it's bewildering to me because according to society, right? This is the external view of society. I went to bed one night as a heterosexual male and woke up the next morning as a lesbian. So I don't really see how that necessarily can happen, but that's how society views transgender people. I used to be a heterosexual male, now I'm a lesbian. So I don't really care. I just know who I'm attracted to. The interesting thing is there is such a stigma. You know, one of the things that we grew up with as our constant companion is shame. Because don't play with dolls. That's a girl's toy. Don't do this. Girls do that. You're not acting manly. Man up. You know, those kind of things. And I've kind of been bewildered anyway, because if you hand most men a newborn baby, they're like, whoa, how do I, you know, they're really awkward with it. So what's wrong with teaching a male child how to hold a baby?
Mm-hmm.
What's wrong with that? There's nothing unmanly about it. If you're ever going to have kids, why wouldn't you want to hold them and hold them correctly and support the head? And, you know,
Right.
they're all awkward because they've been slapped every time they picked up a doll. So I'm kind of bewildered by some of that, you know, the way that we imprint on kids. But the attraction to men is something that's discouraged. I'm not attracted to men in general, although I find some men attractive. And if you look at the term bisexual, that means someone who's attracted to more than one gender. And so by maybe the truest nature of it, because being bisexual has nothing to do with experience. You don't need to have been with both, with more than one gender. It's just a matter of attraction. So I would say that there are some men that I look at and go, wow, he's really hot. I was flipping through Reddit some time back, and there was like a firefighter calendar from Australia, and I went, whoa, let's look at that for a minute. But it's not something I want to spend my life with with a guy. I love Katie very, very much. Katie's also transgender. And so the ridiculousness of some of the laws and the outside perception can be illustrated by this story. I grew up in California. So California is very liberal. And so the birth certificate laws, all I had to do is write a letter to California and send them $35. They changed my birth certificate, sealed the old one, and I'm bang, boom, done. So I have a birth certificate that says Leslie McMurray, has my mom and dad and all that information on it, which is great. So all my paperwork was lined up. Prior to the Obergefell ruling, which was marriage equality back in 2015, Katie could get all of her IDs and everything else changed except the Texas birth certificate, because they wouldn't change it. They would amend it, but it's basically paperclip to the old one. So if somebody asked for the birth certificate, they could see. And so that was kind of a really ignorant thing to do, but they clung to that. That was changed after Obergefell. But I was kidding with her back in 2013, 2014, somewhere in there. And I said, I said, we could go down to the Dallas registrar's office, the county clerk, and we could get a marriage license, because we could present a male birth certificate and a female birth certificate. And I said, but the question is that a heterosexual marriage? Is it a gay marriage because we're both born male? Or is it a lesbian marriage because we both identify as female? It's all of those things, and it's none of those things. It's just the ridiculousness of how society views us.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I like that. Unfortunately, again, run out of time. Bad. I don't know.
Started. What are you talking about?
I know, right? We should have you back on again. I think I'm going to contact Janet and Courtney to reach out to you, and let's get you back on again. There's so much more that I want to ask you, but we just, unfortunately, we have deadlines. We got patients at 10 o'clock waiting. And usually, to be honest with you, Leslie, they only usually last about 40 minutes. but we've got way over here. It's like 53 minutes, I think, or whatever it is. So it's been really awesome. So I want to say a couple of things before you go. Listen, you may have been driving a BMW when you're on the radio, but hell, the work you do, you must be driving a Rolls Royce to work every single day today, because I've researched a little bit. The work you do is absolutely phenomenal. The people you affect by doing your work and being out there must be in the millions by now, because we have to remember the ripple effect that we have. So Leslie, first of all, thank you for coming on the show. Secondly, thank you for the education. And thirdly, I just want to recognize you for being just an amazing person, a beautiful woman, and just out there telling people how it is. And I know that fight is hard because I've done it myself with alcoholism. So thank you so much, Leslie. And hopefully I'll speak to you again. I'll leave Jennifer to take it out.
Yeah, I you know, I'm a little lost for words because you have impacted me in such a deep way. I'm sorry. Thank you for being a warrior.
You're so welcome. That's what we do.
Yeah, I know that you went through a lot of suffering to get where you are today.
And worth it. Like, that's why I make diamonds.
I know. I've made a lot of pearls in my life. Yeah. So thank you for doing this work. And I do want to have you back on. I do want to keep having this conversation. It's an important conversation to have out there in the world. And just thank you for being the amazing parent to your children that you are. Like, thank you so much. That is just a beautiful story.
Thank you.
And I really want you to, what do you want to leave people with? What do you want them to know, our audience to know about transgender, about who we need to be for you and how we can be more for you?
I think more than anything, what's been so common is using fear as a weapon. The government right now in Washington wants to make us afraid of everyone from immigrants to LGBT people to liberals, you name it. We're supposed to be afraid of it. I don't want to live my life in fear. I absolutely refuse to, because people fear that which they don't understand, and fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering. And I don't want to suffer. So if you're afraid of trans people, if you're not sure about us, find out about us, get to know one of us. I always, I don't like the virtual thing because I'm a hugger. Because I say, it's hard to hate somebody you've held in your arms. And so I hug people a lot and say, okay, shouldn't hate that.
I like that.
So I think more than anything, if you've never met somebody who's transgender, go find one of us. We're out and about and around, or call me and we can talk about it, because there's nothing to be afraid of here. We're, really just, we're another flavor of ice cream. And so diversity is a really good thing. And be compassionate.
Guys, myresourcecenter.org at the bottom of the screen now. Go visit the site, give Leslie a call. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. It was an amazing show, and you can bet that in a couple of weeks, Leslie's going to be back. So from all of us, guys, I want to thank you so much for joining the show every single week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And have a great couple of days, guys. We'll see you on Friday.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
Bye.